Chapter 1. Henry opened his eyes and immediately cursed. What the hell? He wasn't in a hospital like he should have been, and for some reason in the back of his mind, he had expected to be dead. He was sitting on what looked like the exterior of a giant satellite floating in space. Stars glittered around him like a spilled box of diamonds. "Oh, good, you're awake," a voice said casually behind him. Henry whipped his head around. A man wearing a ridiculous Hawaiian shirt, sunglasses, and beach shorts was reclining on a deck chair, lazily sipping a martini. You've got to be kidding me. This can't be real," Henry muttered, staring at the bizarre scene. The man raised his glass and tipped his sunglasses down to reveal his pure amber-colored eyes. "Name's Bobby. I'm what kids nowadays like to call a random omnipotent being. I'm in charge of reincarnating folks such as yourself, who have passed before their due time. Sometimes I give you souls a chance to spin wheels of fortune. Sometimes it's a flip of a coin. And sometimes it's 3 wishes. You get what I mean, right? It's a whole business up here in the divine lands." Henry blinked, taking a minute to process the information before he voiced his question. "So, I died, huh?" "Yep. A stray bullet from a drive-by caught you square in the chest. You made it to the hospital, but died before the doctors could stabilize you. You weren't supposed to die this early. The Sisters of Fate send their apologies. They were distracted by Heracles and Theseus when your string snapped. Something about date night plans? I don't really know," Bobby said with a non-committal shrug. Henry stood slack-jawed after hearing the names of 2 demigods. "So what now?" he asked finally, after coming to terms with his situation. "You're going to let me pick a world and some overpowered abilities?" "Haha, sorry, kid. You don't get choices. I'm the one who chooses for you. After all, I'm the one who has to watch you live out your life and await your return once it ends. Lady Death, Anubis, and Styx will also be watching. So I gotta make it interesting for us," Bobby said with an amused grin. Henry deadpanned before sighing. "Great. My new life's gonna be some daytime TV show for bored deities." Bobby threw back his head and laughed before looking back at Henry. "You've got the gist of it, kid. Now, based on what I know of current pop culture and TV shows, your favorite seems to be that dystopian, apocalyptic teen drama. So, guess I'll just drop you in that. Congratulations, kid. You're going to be reincarnated into the 100 TV series." "Wait, you're dumping me in that world?" Henry asked in surprise. "Yep, it'll be fun for you and entertaining for us," Bobby said, taking another slow sip of his drink. "What about powers? Don't I get to pick one or several?" Henry asked quickly, feeling himself starting to fade. "Nope. Already assigned you one. Super Soldier Serum package with enhanced everything. Plus, I added the bonus of giving you combat and weapons mastery and the special trait of extreme comprehension. You're basically Captain America with the potential to become Iron Man." "That sounds pretty awesome," Henry said, as he thought of all the possibilities. "Wait, will I be reborn as a baby?" "Yep, but your memories will return to you just before the timeline for the show starts. So basically, your body will be living a life, but your awareness will awaken when you're about to be sent back to Earth. Good luck, kid." And before Henry could ask another question, Bobby snapped his fingers, and Henry felt himself blip out of existence. An unknown amount of time later, Henry woke with a jolt. His head throbbed, a dull ache behind his eyes as consciousness returned not as a gentle tide, but a crashing wave. He blinked, his eyes struggling to refocus in the oppressive dimness. A single, faint light strip set into the high ceiling cast a sickly glow over his surroundings. He was in a cell. Cold, riveted steel walls surrounded him on all sides. The only break in the monotony, a solid, windowless door. It was a cramped metal box, barely 3 paces in any direction, smelling of recycled air,
ozone and the faint, metallic tang of fear. Then the memories hit. Henry fell to his knees, clutching his skull, as if his hands could keep it from splitting open. It wasn't just a memory, it was a floodgate breaking, a lifetime of experiences, both his past life on Earth and his current life on the Ark, rushing in to fill the void. It felt like his heart had migrated into his cranium, and with every frantic beat, a fresh lance of agony threatened to shatter his sanity. He gritted his teeth, a low groan escaping his lips as he rode out the storm. About a minute later, the psychic assault receded, leaving him shuddering with relief. The pain vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving behind only the crisp, horrifying clarity of his new reality. He collapsed forward, the cold of the floor a welcome shock against his fevered skin. He lay there for a long moment, staring at the scuffed ceiling as the pieces of his life as Henry Masters clicked into place. Son of Martha and Martin. 2 years ago, his parents had been floated, executed by being ejected into the vacuum of space for the crime of stealing water rations. The memory was a raw, open wound. He saw his younger self, scrawny and desperate, fighting like a wild animal to stop the guards. He was nothing against their trained strength, easily subdued and thrown in here. For 2 years, Henry, or Hank, the name his father used to call him, a name that now felt like a secret identity, had waited. He had festered in this metal tomb, his grief and rage the only things keeping him warm, waiting for the day he could get out and wrap his hands around Chancellor Jaha's throat.
And now he was awake. Lying on his back, Hank could feel it. A restless, humming energy coiled within his muscles. His senses were dialed to 11. He could hear the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the Ark's systems, see the individual scratches on the ceiling panels, smell the distinct scent of his own body after 2 years of confinement. But it wasn't the stench of weakness. It was the scent of a caged predator. A slow, grim smile touched his lips. It was time for a test. Still lying flat, he drove the soles of his feet into the floor. It wasn't a dramatic wind-up, just a sudden explosive extension of his legs. The result was instantaneous and shocking. His body launched from the floor like a projectile, slamming his back and shoulders into the solid steel ceiling with a resonant clang that echoed in the small space. He dropped back down, landing on the floor in a heap, but there was no pain, no dizziness, just a dull, satisfying impact that his body absorbed without complaint. He slowly pushed himself to his feet, a genuine grin spreading across his face as he clenched his fists. He could feel the dense muscle fiber shifting under his skin, a reservoir of power that made him feel utterly invincible. "Yeah, I can use this," he muttered to the empty cell, his voice a low rumble that sounded foreign to his own ears. He took stock of his new physique. In his memories, he had been average height, scrawny, all elbows and knees. Now he had to stoop slightly to avoid brushing his head against the ceiling. His frame was leaner, more defined, the kind of wiry strength that spoke of efficiency and explosive potential rather than brute bulk. The rags he wore as clothes now strained against his shoulders and thighs. It was the super soldier serum, he realized. It hadn't just enhanced him, it had optimized him, rebuilding his body into a perfect weapon during its long dormancy.
MCPOV. The silence of my cell was shattered by a sharp hydraulic hiss as heavy bolts retracted. I didn't move, my enhanced hearing having picked up the scuff of boots and the murmur of voices outside long before the mechanism engaged. The door swung outward, and 6 guards filed in, their forms backlit by the harsh artificial light of the corridor. After 2 years in near total gloom, the sudden glare was a physical assault, stabbing into my retinas and forcing me to squint. They were clad in the bulky black body armor of the Ark's security detail, their faces obscured by visored helmets. Each held a crackling electric baton, the air sizzling with their threat. Behind them, a man in a white medical coat hovered nervously, a loaded syringe gleaming in his hand. The guards fanned out with practiced efficiency, their movements tense as they tried to encircle me. One held heavy, reinforced metallic cuffs. "Prisoner 218, face the wall, now," the lead guard barked, his voice distorted slightly by his helmet's calm. I didn't obey. Instead, I looked down at each of them in turn, my new height making the action feel inherently dominant. My gaze, sharpened by the serum, locked on to what I could see of their faces through the visors. I saw the tension in their jaws, the white-knuckled grips on their batons. I remembered it had taken 5 of them to subdue my scrawny, grief-maddened former self after I'd already put 3 of their comrades on the floor. They had come with 6 today, expecting the same broken kid. They had no idea what they were truly dealing with.
"Yeah, not gonna happen, big shot," I said, my voice a low, calm rumble that belied the energy coiling in my limbs. I dropped into a slight crouch, the muscles in my legs and back tensing like compressed springs. "You're not taking me without a fight." The lead guard's face, visible through his clear visor, flushed with anger. He keyed his communicator. "Back up to detention cell 7 Alpha. Prisoner is non-compliant and hostile." He then gestured sharply to his team. "Subdue him." I didn't charge. I let the first guard come to me, his baton raised high. As he stepped into my range, I moved. It wasn't just speed, it was an explosive release of potential energy. One moment I was 3 feet away, the next I was directly in front of him. I drove my fist upward in a piston-like uppercut, catching him squarely under the chin. The impact was sickeningly solid. His helmet cracked against his skull as the force lifted him clean off his feet. He flew upward, his head smacking into the steel ceiling with a dull thwack before his body went limp and crumpled to the floor in a heap of armor and unconsciousness. A stunned silence froze the room for a heartbeat. The remaining guards stared, baffled, their tactical training utterly failing to account for a display of raw, brute strength like that. Then, chaos erupted. They rushed me as one. I pivoted, ignoring the wild swing of a baton that grazed my shoulder, a jolt of electricity that my enhanced nervous system shrugged off like a static shock. I planted my foot and sent a powerful front kick into the lead guard's midsection. The armor did nothing to absorb the force. He was flung backward as if launched from a cannon, sailing through the cell door and smashing into the opposite wall of the corridor outside. He didn't get up. He just slid down the wall, clutching his stomach and retching violently.
3 of them managed to tackle me then, their combined weight dragging me down. I let them. I could have easily thrown them off, sent them flying to join our comrades, but a cooler head prevailed. I had made my point. I had demonstrated that I was no longer the helpless prisoner they remembered. Now it was time to see where they would take me. I ceased my struggle, going limp beneath them. They grunted with effort, snapping the heavy cuffs around my wrists with palpable relief. The doctor, his hands shaking, hurried forward at their signal and jammed the needle into my neck. A cold fluid flooded into my vein, a powerful sedative. I felt it spread, a foreign presence trying to cloud my mind and shut down my body. For the old Hank, it would have been lights out in seconds. For me, it was a faint fog at the edges of my consciousness, easily ignored. I let my eyes roll back into my head, went slack, and played dead. With grunts of effort, 2 of the guards hauled my dead weight up by the shoulders and dragged me out of the cell that had been my tomb for 2 years. I kept my body limp, but behind my closed eyelids, my mind was razor sharp. About 10 minutes later, the muffled sounds of dragging and grunting guards were replaced by clearer voices. My hearing, sharper than it had any right to be, picked up the conversation easily despite the commotion. "Transfer to dropship Unity with the rest of the 100. Chancellor's direct order. He's too volatile for the Ark now." A grunt of agreement. "Fine by me. Let the Earth deal with him. Just get him strapped in and sedated before he wakes up." So it begins, I thought, an inward grin spreading through my consciousness. Bobby wasn't kidding. The timeline was clicking into place with brutal efficiency.
I maintained my limp, sedated act as they hauled me into the dropship's hold. The air here was different, thick with the smell of fear, sweat, and the sharp tang of ozone from the ship's systems. The moment they dragged me through the hatch, a ripple of recognition went through the assembled delinquents. Whoa, is that Masters? Hank? They're sending him? I thought he was in the skybox forever. They've got him strapped down like an animal. They weren't just fastening me into a seat, they were securing a threat. I felt the heavy-duty harness cross my chest, then another set of straps over my thighs and shoulders, cinched down with a force that would have been painful for anyone else. It was overkill, a theatrical display meant to warn every other kid on this ship. This one is different. This one is dangerous. The reactions were a symphony of teenage emotion I could parse with my enhanced perception. There was excitement from those who saw me as some kind of folk hero, the kid who'd fought the system. There was confusion from those who didn't know the story. And underpinning it all was a low hum of fear and anger, directed at the guards who shoved and manhandled them into their own, less restrictive seats. Profanities filled the metallic space, a cacophony of defiance that echoed off the cold walls. I remained a dead weight, my head lolling forward, but my mind was a hive of activity, cataloging every voice, every scuff of a boot, every nervous heartbeat I could hear. Finally, with a deep, resonant hiss, the main door sealed shut. The sound was final, like a tomb closing. The defiant shouts died in a dozen throats, replaced by a sudden, palpable wave of anxiety. I could hear the frantic fidgeting, the sharp intakes of breath, the whispered prayers. Then it came. A deep metallic groan shuddered through the entire frame of the ship, followed by a tremendous force that slammed us all back into our seats. We were launched. The G-force was immense, a crushing weight on our chests. The carefully maintained silence shattered instantly. Voices of worry erupted into full-blown screams of terror and surprise. Kids yelled, not in defiance now, but in pure primal fear, as the dropship tore itself away from the only home any of us had ever known, hurling us toward the deadly unknown green and blue sphere below. And through it all, I kept my body perfectly still. But behind my closed eyes, I was smiling. The cage was finally open. A violent, shuddering jolt rocked the dropship, the sound of screaming metal joining the chorus of human terror. We had entered the atmosphere. The craft bucked and groaned like a living thing in its death throes, rattling teeth and shaking bones. I remained a statue amidst the chaos, my mind a calm center in the storm, patiently waiting for the inevitable conclusion of our descent. Then the screens flickered to life, casting a ghostly blue glow on panicked faces. A voice, one I knew all too well, one that haunted my dreams and fueled my hatred, echoed through the cabin. Chancellor Jaha. "Prisoners of the Ark, hear me now." His voice, dripping with faux solemnity, had a practiced effect, momentarily quieting the whimpers and cries.
I immediately tuned him out. It was all a formality, a hollow ritual to sanitize the fact that they were throwing us away. His words were the same righteous bullshit he'd used to justify floating my parents. A second chance, Mount Weather, humanity's survival. It was the standard motivational crap, designed to make our sacrificial execution feel like a noble mission. I let his speech wash over me without meaning, a meaningless drone. Instead, I turned my focus inward, my enhanced mind rapidly analyzing the strategic options before me. Option 1. Independence. The moment the hatch opened, I could simply walk away. With my abilities, I could survive alone, perhaps even thrive. No attachments, no liabilities, just pure, uncomplicated freedom. Option 2. Leadership. I could seize control of this chaotic, frightened group, organize them, secure a perimeter, and turn them into a functioning colony. It would be the most direct path to establishing a power base and ensuring my own security through numbers. Option 3. Anonymity. I could fade into the background, be just another face in the crowd. It was the safest play, avoiding attention and responsibility while I assessed the lay of the land. My thoughts were shattered by a deafening roar and a final catastrophic impact. The world became a violent, spinning blur of shrieking metal, flying sparks, and the sickening crunch of bodies being thrown against unyielding structures. I heard the distinct, wet thud of breaking bones, the sharp cry of pain cut short. I chose that precise moment of peak chaos to wake up, my eyes snapping open to assess the damage. Through the haze of smoke and flickering emergency lights, I saw the cost. 3 bodies were strewn near the front. One, a boy with dark hair, was already stirring groggily. The other 2 lay at unnatural angles, their limbs twisted, their chests still, dead most likely. My gaze swept across the hold, taking in the shell-shocked, terrified faces of the survivors. They were children, wide-eyed and trembling. And then I saw her, a young girl no more than 12, her face pale and streaked with tears, staring at the world with pure, unadulterated terror. In that single, silent moment, my choice became clear. Anonymity was a coward's path. Abandoning them was an option, but not the right one. I would take charge. Sparks cascaded from torn conduits, dancing across the mangled floor. The main lights died, replaced by the dim, pulsating glow of emergency orange beams that cast long, frantic shadows. The ship gave one final groaning shudder as it settled into its new, permanent resting place on Earth. For a few seconds, there was a stunned, ringing silence, broken only by the hiss of escaping steam and the crackle of dying electronics. Then, tentatively, kids began to unstrap themselves, their movements clumsy with shock, their voices hushed whispers as they tried to comprehend that they were, against all odds, alive. I didn't rush. I remained in my seat, a picture of deliberate calm. With a series of sharp metallic clicks, I slowly, methodically unfastened each of the heavy-duty straps that had been meant to contain a monster. The reinforced buckles fell away, and I rose slowly. A path cleared before me as I walked, the other kids parting like a sea of awe and whispered fear. Their murmurs were a tapestry of, "That's Hank Masters," and "What did they do to him?" Those from my section of the dropship, however, didn't just move aside. They fell into step behind me, a silent, tentative procession, following me toward the ladders leading down to the main exit.
"Hank! Dude, it is you!" A familiar voice cut through the murmurs. I turned to see my cousin, Thomas, pushing his way through, a wide, goofy smile breaking across his face. He was my mother's sister's son, and in every way that mattered, my brother. We had been inseparable, getting into every kind of trouble the Ark could offer, until his own father was floated and their family fractured under the strain. He was 2 years my senior,
19 to my 17, but the years of hardship had carved a certain resilience into his features that I recognized instantly. He didn't hesitate, pulling me into a crushing hug that I carefully returned, mindful of my newfound strength. Holding me at arm's length, his eyes widened as he took in my transformed physique. The broadened shoulders, the defined muscle that strained against my prison garb. "Man, what the hell have they been feeding you in the sky cell?" he asked, his tone a mix of genuine curiosity and brotherly concern. I gave him a small, knowing smile. Just had lots of time on my hands and nothing to do, so I worked out and built myself up. Thomas's smile turned sad, a shared understanding of my 2-year isolation passing between us in a single look. He then glanced over my shoulder, his expression shifting to a familiar teasing smirk. "Looks like you got yourself a fan club." I turned. Sure enough, about 20 kids, some my age, some younger, hadn't moved to descend. They were just standing there, watching us, with a mix of hope and apprehension. I raised a brow. "Why haven't you guys gone down yet?" A boy my age, Ricky, I think his name was, stepped forward, wringing his hands nervously. We want to follow you. Your dad was the top survivalist researcher back on the Ark, and your mom was the wildlife specialist. That means you know how to survive out there. So, could we stick with you?" I let my gaze sweep over them, seeing not just delinquents, but scared kids looking for an anchor in this terrifying new world. I glanced back at Thomas for his opinion. He met my look and gave a single, firm nod, his support unwavering. "Fine," I said, my voice carrying a note of authority that felt both new and natural. "Stick close." A collective, audible sigh of relief passed through the group. As I dropped down the final ladder to the main deck, where the massive doors were located, I found a large crowd already gathered, their voices rising in a heated argument about how to open them. Before the debate could escalate, the doors hissed violently and began to slide open. A blast of pure, unfiltered light rushed in, forcing us all to squint and raise our hands against the glare. My enhanced eyes adjusted faster than the others, the blur of green and blue resolving into stunning clarity. And the smell. It was the first thing that truly struck me. It was an orchestra of scents my brain had only ever read about. Damp earth, rotting leaves, the sweet perfume of wildflowers, the crispness of morning dew, all underscored by the acrid tang of scorched metal and burning soil. I took a deep, refreshing breath, feeling my lungs expand, processing the rich, oxygen-heavy air with an efficiency that was anything but human. Before us lay a world of impossible vibrancy. The dropship had carved a smoldering crater into a clearing, beyond which a dense, living wall of trees rose, a tapestry of greens, browns, and golds. All around me, kids stood slack-jawed, their eyes wide with a wonder that eclipsed their fear. Then, a figure moved from the front. A beautiful brunette, Octavia Blake, unmistakable even to me, walked slowly down the ramp as if in a trance. She paused at the edge where metal met soil, then took a final short drop onto the ground itself. She turned back to face all of us, still clustered in the ship's maw, a wide, radiant smile blooming on her face as she spread her arms wide to embrace the entire world. "We're back, bitches!" she yelled, her voice a triumphant roar that echoed through the trees. It was the spark that ignited the powder keg of pent-up emotion. A unified yell of pure, unadulterated joy erupted from the crowd as they surged past me, pouring out of the dropship. They jumped, dove, and crawled on the ground, some laughing, some crying, all going wild with the sheer, impossible excitement of freedom. A genuine smile finally found its way to my own face. As the initial wave rushed out, I turned to see my own group, their faces alight with the same hesitant hope, Thomas standing solidly by my side. "Let's go," I said. Then I ran out, my boots hitting the soft, giving earth for the first time. Behind me, my group yelled in delight as they spilled onto the ground, some even stopping to grab handfuls of dirt, smelling it, feeling it, truly understanding for the first time that they were home.
The initial wild euphoria of touchdown was as volatile as it was short-lived. The cacophony of whoops, laughter, and the sheer sensory overload of feeling real grass underfoot and unfiltered air in their lungs began to subside, replaced by a dawning, sobering reality. They were on an unknown planet, surrounded by unknown threats, with limited supplies and zero structure. The chaos was a vacuum, and nature and leadership abhors a vacuum. I stood for a moment longer, letting the others revel while my enhanced senses mapped the immediate area. The sound of the wind through the pine needles was a constant, whispering sigh. The scent of the forest was a complex layering of life, decay, and potential danger. I could hear the scuttling of small creatures in the undergrowth, the distant call of an unfamiliar bird, and beneath it all, the rapid, anxious heartbeats of the 99 other teenagers scattered around the clearing. The celebration was already fracturing. Some kids were staring into the dense, shadowy tree line with growing trepidation. Others were arguing over scattered pieces of debris from the crash. A few were just sitting on the ground, looking lost and overwhelmed. The unity born of their first breath of earth was dissipating faster than the smoke from our crashed ship. It was time to act. "Thomas, Ricky," I said, my voice cutting through the ambient noise with a calm authority that made both of them snap to attention. They moved closer, their previous levity replaced by a serious focus. "I need you two to get our group organized. We have 20 people who've chosen to follow. That's a responsibility, not a fan club. We need to turn them into an asset right now." I turned to Ricky first. He was nervous, but there was a sharp intelligence in his eyes. "Ricky, I need you to find something to write with and on. A piece of cloth, a strip of insulation from the dropship, charcoal from the scorched earth. Improvise. I want a list. Every one of our 20. Their name, their age, and most importantly, their knowledge base. What did they do on the Ark? Mechanics, botany, medicine, carpentry, even if they just worked in hydroponics sorting seeds. I need to know. Can you do that?" Ricky's chest puffed out slightly at being given a critical task. "Yeah, Hank, I can do that. I worked in the archives. I'm good with lists." He gave a quick, sharp nod and immediately turned, starting to corral the members of our nascent group who were still marveling at the trees. I then looked at Thomas. "We need specific skill sets. Our 4, Amber, Roy, Lily, and Luke. I saw them being loaded in. Did you see where they went?" Thomas grinned, his eyes scanning the crowd with a practiced ease. "Yeah, I spotted them. Amber was trying to identify a weed before we even got off the ramp. Roy was already eyeballing the dropship's frame like he wanted to take it apart. Lily and Luke were sticking together, as always. I'll find them." As he turned to leave, he paused, looking back at me. "What are you going to do?" A slow, predatory grin spread across my face. I gestured with my head towards the smoldering wreckage of the dropship. "I'm going to our armory. I'm going to make us some spears." Thomas's grin mirrored my own. "Hell yeah." With that, he melted into the crowd, his tall frame cutting a path as he searched for our friends. Left alone for a moment, I closed my eyes and took another deep breath. But this time, it was different. It wasn't for wonder, it was for analysis. I filtered out the human noises, focusing on the forest. The rustle of leaves wasn't just wind, it was the passage of air through specific densities of foliage, giving me a subconscious map of the terrain. The scent of pine was strong,
But underneath it, I could detect the faint, musky odor of what might be a predator's territory marker, and the damp, loamy smell of a water source not too far away. My mind, with its extreme comprehension, was already cross-referencing this sensory data with the survival manuals and Earth ecology texts I had devoured in my past life, and that had been part of my father's research. The theory was now being violently, wonderfully welded to practice. I moved towards the dropship, my gaze analytical. The Unity was a tomb, a monument, and now a quarry. I wasn't looking at a crashed spaceship. I was looking at raw materials. The twisted aluminum struts of the seating could be hammered into spear points. The shredded insulation from damaged wiring could be used for cordage. Shattered console screens could yield sharp, glass-like shards. I found a section of the hull that had been torn away on impact, a jagged piece of a lightweight titanium alloy about the length of my arm. It was perfect. I placed my foot against a still-attached section, gripped the loose piece, and with a sharp, controlled exertion of force, I ripped it free. The sound of tearing metal was deafening, causing several kids nearby to jump and stare. I ignored them. Next, I needed a haft. I walked to the tree line, my eyes scanning the younger trees. I needed something straight, strong, and dry. I found a sapling of a hard, dense wood. My memory supplied the name hickory from my father's texts, about 6 feet tall and 2 inches in diameter. I gripped it near the base. Instead of trying to break it, I focused my strength into a rapid twisting motion, like unscrewing it from the earth. The fibers at the base groaned and then snapped with a sound like a gunshot. I stripped the branches with my bare hands, the rough bark scraping harmlessly against my toughened skin. Now for the point. I carried the metal sheet and the sapling to a large flat rock near the edge of the clearing. I needed a tool to work the metal. Scouting the crater, I found a heavier, denser rock, one with a sharp granite edge. It was a crude hammerstone. I placed the titanium strip on the flat rock, selected a point about 8 inches from one end, and began to methodically hammer the granite against it, focusing the blows to create a narrow, tapering point. The clanging of stone on metal rang out through the clearing, a rhythmic, purposeful sound amidst the chaos. Each strike was precise, my enhanced muscle control and comprehension of physics allowing me to shape the tough metal with an efficiency that would have been impossible for anyone else. I wasn't just bashing it. I was cold forging it, aligning the metal's grain, working it until it was a lethal, leaf-shaped point. The process was mesmerizing, and I became aware of a small audience gathering at a respectful distance, watching the seemingly primitive yet unnaturally effective process. Once the point was shaped, I used the sharp edge of the granite to carve a deep split into the thicker end of the hickory sapling. I then hammered the base of the metal point, the part I hadn't tapered, to thin it slightly, before carefully driving it into the split in the wood. A final narrower strip of metal, sharpened to a razor edge, became a blade that I lashed to the side of the spearhead using strips of wiring insulation I'd torn from the wreckage, creating a brutal hooking and cutting edge. In under 15 minutes, I held a finished, professional-grade weapon. It was no simple pointed stick. It was a tool of war and hunting, balanced, sharp, and deadly. I hefted it, feeling its perfect weight in my hand. A flick of my wrist sent it whistling through the air to thud solidly into the trunk of a tree 20 yards away. A collective gasp went up from the onlookers. I was about to retrieve it and start on a second when a voice called out from behind me. "Hank?" I turned. It was Clark Griffin. Beside her, looking decidedly uncomfortable, was Wells Jaha. The sight of him sent a cold, familiar spike of anger through my veins, but I quashed it immediately. Wells was not his father. Clark looked tired but resolute. her blonde hair streaked with grime. Wells held himself stiffly, his eyes darting from my face to the spear embedded in the tree and back again, a flicker of fear in his gaze. He had every reason to be afraid. He knew who I was, and he knew what his father had done. "Griffin," I said, my tone neutral. My eyes then shifted to Wells. "Jaha." Wells flinched almost imperceptibly. "Masters? Hank, look, about my father." I cut him off, my voice low and steady, meant for his ears and Clark's alone. "Save it, Wells. I don't blame you for your father's sins. You didn't pull the lever that spaced my parents. He did. My quarrel is with Chancellor Jaha, not his son." The relief that washed over Wells's face was palpable. His shoulders, which had been hunched near his ears, relaxed slightly. "Thank you," he breathed. Clark watched the exchange, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She had been in the cell opposite mine for a short while before being moved. We'd spoken through the vents, brief hushed conversations about our parents, about the Ark's injustices. There was a mutual respect there, born of shared intellect and shared loss. "I'm glad you're here, Hank," Clark said, her gaze sweeping over my assembled group, who were now watching our interaction intently, and then to the spear in the tree. "We are going to need order, and that." She gestured at the weapon. "That's the plan," I replied. "What's the situation?" Her expression turned grim. "It's not good. We landed hard, and we're on the wrong side of the ridge. I triangulated our position using the maps my mother gave me." She pointed towards a massive forest-covered mountain range that loomed in the distance. "The supply depot at Mount Weather is on the other side of that." "How far?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I needed to hear her say it, to make it real for the others who were now listening. Clark took a deep breath. "A 20-mile hike as the crow flies. But we're not crows. With this terrain and this many unprepared people, it's at least a 60-mile trek, through unknown territory." A murmur of dismay ran through the crowd that had gathered. 60 miles. It was a death sentence for many of them. The information settled in the air, heavy and oppressive. The brief joy of arrival was utterly extinguished, replaced by the cold, hard math of survival. 60 miles of dense forest, potential predators, and who knew what else. The Ark had sent them to die, and the geography of Earth was just underlining the point. I looked from Clark's worried face to Wells's anxious one, then out at the sea of frightened young faces turning to me, to Clark, to anyone who looked like they had a plan. The vacuum was present, and it was time to fill it. "Cool, a map!" A new voice, laced with a false, nervous cheer, cut through the heavy silence that had followed Clark's grim assessment. We turned to see a scrawny kid with a pair of makeshift goggles pushed up on his forehead, striding over, doing his best to look nonchalant. Behind him was a young man of Asian descent with a calm, observant gaze. Jasper and Monty. I remembered them from the engineering track and the agro station, respectively. We hadn't been close, but in the tight-knit, suffocating community of the Ark, everyone knew everyone. "Hey, Hank," Monty greeted, his voice steady and his nod respectful. He was always the more grounded of the two. "Monty, Jasper, good to see you both made it down in one piece," I replied with a curt nod, my focus already shifting back to the larger problem. "Yeah, man. By the way," Jasper interjected, his eyes wide as they scanned my transformed physique. "How come you got so, big? Does Skybox have a secret gym or something?" "Small talk later, all right, guys?" Wells interjected, his voice tight with stress. He gestured vaguely towards the wrecked dropship. "We're bleeding heat and structural integrity, and our communications with the Ark are completely dead. The wires are fried to a crisp." "All that matters right now is getting to Mount Weather," stated Clark, her tone leaving no room for argument. She turned her blue-eyed gaze at me, a silent question hanging in the air. "Hank, you with us?" Just as I opened my mouth to answer, a new, challenging voice rang out from the edge of the crowd. "You thinking of listening to the Ark? We're on the ground. That's not good enough for you?" The group parted to reveal Bellamy Blake, his expression a mask of defiant arrogance. He was flanked by his sister Octavia, whose face was still flushed with the thrill of freedom, and a few other delinquents who seemed to have gravitated towards his rebellious energy. They were the ones who saw the crash not as a disaster, but as a liberation. "We need to find Mount Weather," Wells insisted, sighing in frustration as he stepped forward to confront Bellamy directly. "You heard my father's message. That has to be our first priority." "Screw your father," Octavia spat, her disdain palpable. She looked Wells up and down as if he were something she'd scraped off her boot. "What, you think you're in charge here? You and your little princess?" She jerked her chin towards Clark. The tension escalated, a visible crack forming in the group. It was the exact opposite of what we needed. "No," I said, my voice flat and final, cutting through the brewing argument like a knife. I stepped forward, deliberately placing myself between the two factions. They're not in charge.
Every eye in the clearing swiveled to me. I saw the spectrum of reactions play out across their faces, the fear and uncertainty from those who only knew me by reputation, the boy who'd been locked in solitary for 2 years and had emerged as something other, and then the looks of relief and solid support from my own people. Thomas, Ricky, and the others moved to stand just behind me, a silent, formidable presence. Amber with her keen eye for plants, Roy, whose hands were already itching to build, Lily and Luke, a quiet, efficient team. They were here. "I'm taking charge," I announced, my voice projecting easily across the clearing without needing to shout. It was a statement of fact, not a request. "And my people are going to be over there." I gestured to a clear area near the dropship's carcass, making immediate preparations for our survival. "Right now, you've got 3 choices in front of you." I let my gaze sweep over the entire assembled group, making eye contact with as many as I could, forcing them to engage. 1. I held up a single finger. "You can go ahead and act like animals just let out of their cages, running wild until the food runs out or the predators pick you off, in which case you will be dead within a week." A nervous ripple went through the crowd. 2. A second finger joined the first. "You can join us, contribute your skills to our shared survival, follow the rules we set to keep everyone alive. In that case, your chances of seeing next month go up exponentially." Then I raised a third finger, my expression turning grim. "Or 3, you can take your chances entirely on your own, out there in those woods. I wouldn't take option 3, though. From what I can smell and hear, that would be a far worse and far more painful outcome for any of you." The silence that followed was thick and heavy. I had laid it out plainly. Order with me, chaotic freedom with Bellamy, or a solitary death. Bellamy's face darkened, his jaw tightening. He couldn't let this challenge to his budding authority stand. "I got a better idea," he said, stepping forward until we were barely a foot apart. His friends shuffled behind him, trying to look tough, but failing to hide their nervousness as they faced me and my group. "How about you and your privileged friends go get food for us, and we don't kick your asses for trying to act like a new chancellor?" A dry, humorless laugh escaped me. I didn't move an inch, but my posture shifted subtly, my shoulders squaring, my weight settling into a ready stance. The difference between us was suddenly stark. He was all bluster and rage. I was calm, focused power. The air crackled with the promise of violence. "Listen," Clark's voice sharp and desperate cut between us. She physically stepped into the space between me and Bellamy, her hands raised as if to push us apart. "If we don't get to Mount Weather, we won't last long here. We know nothing about Earth's current state, especially any side effects and mutations the radiation might have caused in the ecosystem. Mount Weather is our best hope of surviving, and we can't be divided. The only way any of us get through this is by banding together."
She stood there, panting slightly, her plea for unity hanging in the smoky air. The fate of the 100 now teetered on the edge of a knife, waiting to see which way it would fall. Like I said, it's your choice, I stated, my voice flat and devoid of any plea. It was a simple equation, and I had laid out the variables: survival or rebellion, your funeral. I deliberately took a step back, breaking the intense standoff. The message was clear. I wasn't asking for a fight, but I wouldn't back down from one. My focus was on action, not posturing. We'll be over here building, organizing, and preparing for the 60-mile hike to Mount Weather, I announced to the entire clearing. If you have a brain in your head and want to live to see next week, you're welcome to join us. Come on over. With that, I turned my back on Bellamy and his faction, a calculated move that demonstrated both my confidence and my dismissal of him as an immediate physical threat. The crowd parted before me like I was a ship cutting through water. My original 20 fell into step behind me without hesitation, a solid, purposeful block moving through the uncertain mass of teenagers. I saw Wells and Clark exchange a quick, loaded glance before Clark gave a sharp nod and followed. Wells, after a moment's hesitation, did the same. Jasper and Monty, sensing where the real plan was forming, scurried after them. "Come on, man, this is where the food and the sharp sticks are going to be," I heard Monty mutter to Jasper. We reached the area near the dropship's stern that I had mentally designated as our operational base. Already, Roy and a few others were assessing the giant silvery parachute fabric, discussing how to rig it into a shelter. Lily was quietly directing a couple of kids to gather scattered debris that could be used as tools. I stopped and turned to face my growing assembly. "Thomas, you're in charge here with Ricky. Roy, you handle fortifications and scavenging from the dropship. Lily, you're on resource inventory and management. Amber, I need you to start identifying any local flora that might be edible or medicinal. Do not let anyone eat anything until you've cleared it." Thomas nodded, his expression serious. "You got it, Hank. We'll turn the scrap heap into a home." He clapped Ricky on the shoulder. "Come on, list boy. Let's get these new recruits sorted." I then looked at Clark and Wells. "The camp is secure. Now we move. We're going to Mount Weather." "Just the three of us?" Wells asked, a note of concern in his voice. "Hey, don't forget us," Monty said, stepping forward with Jasper. "If there's tack at Mount Weather, you'll need someone who can tell a circuit board from a dinner plate. And Jasper's, well, he's good at causing distractions." "Which is a valuable skill," Jasper added, slightly offended. Before I could respond, another voice chimed in. "I'm coming too." Finn Collins sauntered over, that trademark lopsided grin on his face, although it didn't quite reach his eyes. He looked at Clark. "Can't let you have all the fun, princess." Then a more determined voice cut through. "So am I." Octavia Blake pushed her way to the front, her chin held high, her eyes blazing with a desire for adventure that outweighed her brother's protective rage. "No, you're not." Bellamy had followed, his face like a thundercloud. He grabbed her arm. "Oh, it's too dangerous. You don't know what's out there." Octavia wrenched her arm free. "That's the whole point, Belle. We don't know anything. I'm not staying here to hide in a crashed can. I need to see it. I need to see everything." She turned to me, her gaze challenging. "I can keep up. I'm fast and I'm not afraid." I assessed her for a moment. She had a feral energy that could be useful, and her spirit was a resource in itself. "She makes her own choices, Bellamy," I said, my tone leaving no room for debate. "If she wants to come, she carries her weight." Bellamy's jaw worked, his hands clenching into fists. He looked from my implacable face to his sister's defiant one, realizing he couldn't win this battle without starting a war he wasn't ready to fight. "If anything happens to her," he threatened, his voice a low growl. "Then it happens," I replied coolly. "That's the risk we all take by being here. Now, are you going to help your people here, or are you going to stand there and sulk?" With a final furious glare at me and a worried look at Octavia, Bellamy spun on his heel and stalked back towards his own followers, who were looking increasingly lost and disorganized. The display of decisive leadership wasn't lost on the rest of the kids still milling in the center of the clearing.
as our group began to buzz with purposeful activity, unfurling parachutes, hauling scrap metal, starting Ricky's inventory. A slow trickle of others began to cross the invisible line. They were the ones who were scared, the ones who saw the chaos around Bellamy, and the order being built here. One by one, then in small groups, 18 more kids approached Ricky, who was now sitting on a crate with his makeshift charcoal stick and a salvaged piece of insulation panel, looking officious and important. "Name, age, and what you're good at," he'd say, and they would answer, their voices a mix of hope and anxiety. I watched as our numbers swelled to 48. It was nearly half the delinquents. We were now the majority. Thomas moved among them, assigning tasks, his natural charisma and my implicit authority creating a bubble of efficient calm amidst the surrounding uncertainty. Lily was already organizing the collected debris into piles, musable metal, wiring, plastics. Roy was directing 2 burly kids on where to drag a large piece of hull plating for a windbreak. Satisfied that the camp was in capable hands, I turned to my expedition team. Clark, the pragmatic leader, Wells, the earnest heir, Finn, the charming scavenger, Jasper, the nervous jester, Monty, the brilliant tech, and Octavia, the wild spirit. A strange assortment, but each brought something to the table. I hefted the spear I had forged. "All right," I said, my gaze sweeping over them, before settling on the dense, forbidding tree line that marked the beginning of our trek. "Mount Weather is waiting for us. Let's go see what Earth has to throw at us."